Some men find out their wife is cheating through a text message left open on the kitchen counter. Some find a receipt. Some get an anonymous tip from a friend who felt guilty keeping a secret. Me? I found out because of a parking stub. And I know how that sounds. A parking stub. But stay with me, because by the time this story is done, you are going to understand exactly how a $5 parking validation card from a hotel garage in downtown Fort Worth, Texas can unravel 17 years of marriage, expose a conspiracy that stole 3 years of my professional life, and end with me standing in a room full of the most powerful people in Texas sports media, raising a glass, while the man who tried to destroy me received the single most public humiliation of his career. But we'll get there. Let's start at the beginning. My name is Mike Baker. I'm 47 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life doing the one thing I was born to do: writing. Sports journalism. Specifically, the kind that matters. The kind that isn't just a recap of last night's game, but the deeper story underneath it. The politics inside a locker room. The financial engineering of a franchise trade. The human being behind the statistic. I've had pieces run in places that made my mother call me crying. Good crying. I lived, at the time this story takes place, in a 2-story house on Briarwood Lane in the Ridgela Hills neighborhood, on the west side of Fort Worth. Good street. Wide lots. The kind of neighborhood where people wave at each other from their driveways and actually mean it. We'd been there 6 years. My wife Camille and I bought it the year she got her first on-camera contract with KTVT Channel 11, the CBS affiliate in Dallas-Fort Worth. She was the rising star. I was the guy whose byline you'd see in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and later at Lone Star Sports Weekly, the regional sports magazine where I'd spent the last 8 years of my career. Camille Baker. She is beautiful in that way that makes people trust her on sight. Warm, dark eyes, a natural ease in front of a camera, the kind of smile that says, "I'm your friend," before she even opens her mouth. She was 42 when this story begins. We met at a media conference in Austin when I was 30 and she was 25. She was there as an intern with a local ABC affiliate, and I was there pitching a feature to the Texas Monthly Table, and somehow we ended up at the same bar at 11 p.m. talking for 4 hours. We were married in 2007 in a small ceremony in Fredericksburg, Texas. Wine country, hill country. The whole romantic picture. For the first several years, it was good. Really good. We had no children. That was a long, tender conversation we'd had and arrived at together. And I won't say more than that because it's private and it isn't the point of this story. The point of this story is what happened in the winter of 2024. Now, before I get to the parking stub, let me tell you about Blake Campbell. Blake Campbell was the editor-in-chief of Lone Star Sports Weekly. He had held that position for 11 years. He was 53 years old, trim in that way that comes from a lifetime of competitive tennis. With salt and pepper hair he wore slightly too long in a way that suggested he still thought of himself as younger than he was. He had an office on the 14th floor of the Burnett Plaza building in downtown Fort Worth. A corner office, which he mentioned approximately once every 4 conversations. He drove a silver Mercedes GLC 300. He wore French cuff shirts on Thursdays, because he said Thursdays felt like the right day for them. I know. Charming guy. Blake Campbell had been my editor for 8 years, and for 6 of those 8 years I genuinely believed he was the reason my career had leveled out the way it had. Not plateaued, leveled out like a road through a good stretch of country. Steady, solid, respected. He had given me the kind of platform that let me do real work, and I had thanked him for it more times than I can count. I had no idea that for the last 3 years, starting in January of 2022, Blake Campbell had been quietly, methodically, surgically dismantling my career from the inside. Sitting in his corner office on the 14th floor of Burnett Plaza, in his Thursday French cuffs, killing my best stories and reassigning them to other writers, freezing my pitches, marking my work as not quite right for the direction we're going, in editorial meetings I wasn't allowed to attend, moving my byline down the masthead so gradually I almost didn't notice. Almost. Here's what I noticed. In January of 2024, a writer named Devin White, 29 years old, 2 years out of UT Austin's journalism program, good kid, talented, had a piece run in Texas Monthly under his byline titled "The Money Behind the Cowboys." How Dallas's ownership structure is quietly reshaping the NFC East. I had pitched that exact piece to Blake in March of 2022. He told me the angle was too inside baseball for our readership. He told me to shelve it. That same month, White's piece won a regional award from the Texas Press Association. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the H-E-B on Camp Bowie Boulevard for about 2 minutes after I read that. Just sat there. Grocery bags in the back seat. Engine off. This had happened before. Not the White piece specifically. That was the first time the pattern had a name attached to it. But the general shape of it. Stories I'd pitched getting buried, then surfacing somewhere else. The slow creep of fewer front-of-book placements. The sense that something was being applied to my career from the outside, like pressure on a water hose, not cutting off the flow entirely, just squeezing. I drove home. I did not say anything to Camille that night. I put the groceries away and made dinner, and sat at the table with her and said very little, and she did not seem to notice, which, looking back, tells me something. The parking stub showed up 3 weeks later. It was a Saturday morning in late February of 2024. I was doing laundry, because in our house, I did the laundry, have done the laundry for 15 years, which is a completely separate complaint for a completely separate day, and I was going through the pockets of Camille's coat before throwing it in the wash. I do this because Camille is constitutionally incapable of checking her own pockets, and I have sent too many lip balms through the spin cycle to keep making that mistake. In the left inside pocket, a receipt from Starbucks, chai latte, which she has every morning, nothing unusual. In the right outside pocket, a parking validation stub from the Worthington Renaissance Fort Worth Hotel, downtown, dated the previous Thursday, a Thursday I distinctly remembered because Camille had told me she was going to dinner with Renee, her producer at KTVT. The stub was time-stamped, entry at 6:14 p.m., exit at 11:47 p.m. Now, the Worthington Renaissance is not the kind of hotel you go to for a business dinner. It is the kind of hotel you go to for other things. And parking at a hotel for 5.5 hours while telling your husband you're at a restaurant with a colleague is the kind of behavior that does not have a great many innocent explanations. I stood there in the laundry room off the kitchen, coat in one hand, parking stub in the other, and I did something I am not proud of. I kept it. I put it in the pocket of my own jeans. I threw the coat in the wash. I walked back to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee, and I sat at the table with my laptop and I stared at a blank document for the better part of an hour. Because here's the thing about being a journalist for 20 years. You know what evidence is. You know what a single data point means and what it doesn't mean. And you know, better than almost anyone, that the worst thing you can do with a lead is act on it before you have the full picture. So I waited. I had no idea what I was about to find. 2 weeks passed. I was not idle during those 2 weeks. I started paying attention in ways I had not paid attention before. Not in a paranoid, obsessive way. In a reporter way. Calm. Methodical. I noted when Camille came home, and when she didn't. I noticed the way she angled her phone screen away from me when a text came in, which was not something she had always done. I noticed that she had started wearing a different perfume. Something lighter, more expensive. On the evenings, she said she was working late. And I went back through my professional history. I pulled every story I had pitched to Blake Campbell in the past 3 years, 31 pitches. I cross-referenced them against pieces that had run in competing outlets in the same period. 11 of my pitched angles had appeared elsewhere, sometimes nearly verbatim in terms of framing, within 3 to 8 months of my submission. 11 out of 31. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern, and a pattern means a source. Someone had been sharing my pitches, my unpublished pre-submission pitches, which existed only in emails sent to Blake Campbell and in the editorial Google Drive that only he and I had access to. I'm going to let that sit there for a second. Only he and I. On a Monday in mid-March of 2024, I was home by 2 p.m. I had a late editorial call with Blake that I'd been planning to take from my home office. I was packing a bag, not because I was leaving, but because I was heading out to cover a story in Arlington the next morning and I wanted to be packed ahead of time. Classic Baker efficiency. I heard the front door open. She wasn't supposed to be home. Camille had a 3 p.m. live hit from the KTVT studios in Dallas, She had told me that morning she'd be back by 7. It was 2:15 on a Monday. I heard her voice, bright, relaxed, at ease in a way she hadn't sounded around me in months. And then I heard a second voice. A man's voice. I set down the bag. The instinct was immediate and physical. Get out of sight. I don't know why. Some part of my brain understood, before the rest of me caught up, that I did not want to be seen. Not yet. I moved to the back stairs. Our house has a back staircase off the kitchen, an original feature from when the house was built in 1962, and I used it to slip down to the kitchen level and then straight out the back door into the yard. The backyard was dry and cold. Late Texas winter, 50 degrees, gray sky, no wind. Our back porch runs along the length of the house, and there are 2 tall windows that look into the kitchen and the open-plan dining area beyond it. I stood against the exterior wall, 3 feet from those windows, and I heard everything. The voice I heard, the man's voice, coming clearly through the old single-pane glass. I placed it in less than 3 seconds. Blake Campbell. Of course it was. Camille was moving around the kitchen. I could hear cabinet doors, the refrigerator opening. She sounded relaxed, happy, the way she used to sound in the first years we were together. "Don't think about that, Mike. You're going to love this wine," she said. "I picked it up from that place on Magnolia Avenue." "You know I trust your taste," Blake said. There was a warmth in his voice that I had never heard directed at me in 8 years of professional relationship. A pause, the sound of a pour, and then Blake said something that changed everything. "Has he said anything to you about the white piece?" Camille laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a dismissive one. "He mentioned it once. Sat with it for a night. You know Mike, he processes and then he files it away and moves on. He's not going to push." Good. Because the Dallas piece was directly from his March 2022 submission. I mean directly. Devin cleaned it up, but the core angle was Baker's. I know. A beat. Was that a problem? It would be if he was the type to make it one. But that's the whole point, isn't it? Blake's voice dropped slightly, not in volume, but in register, more deliberate. He's manageable. I stopped breathing. Manageable. He's going to figure it out eventually, Camille said. Not if the rate keeps going the way it is. Another year, maybe 18 months, and he'll be too far down the masthead to matter. Then we restructure the section, and the question answers itself. I stood in that backyard and felt something that I can only describe as every feeling I'd had for 3 years. Every slow frustration, every morning I looked at my diminished byline, every pitch meeting where something I'd built fell flat for reasons I couldn't see, all of it collapsing into a single point of perfect clarity. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was erasing me. My pulse was steady. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel rage, white-hot, explosive, the kind of rage that makes a man do something that ends careers and marriages simultaneously in the wrong direction. But what I felt was quieter than that. It was clarity. I pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memos app, and I held it up toward the window. 12 minutes and 43 seconds of audio. That was what I recorded standing in my backyard in 50-degree Fort Worth weather, holding my phone up to a kitchen window while my wife and my editor drank wine in my kitchen, and discussed, calmly, casually, the way people discuss renovating a bathroom or planning a vacation, the systematic destruction of my career. 12 minutes and 43 seconds. It was the most productive 12 minutes of my professional life. They left together at around 4 p.m. I heard Camille call out that she'd be back by 8, that she was heading into the station. She was not heading to the station. I waited 15 minutes after I heard the front door close. Then I went inside. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink, both glasses. I rinsed the glasses, dried them, put them back in the cabinet. Then I sat down at my kitchen table. Our kitchen table, the one we bought at a furniture shop off Hewlin Street when we moved into this house, and I listened to the recording, all 12 minutes of it. Then I listened again. Then I opened my laptop, connected my phone, and backed the recording up to 3 separate places, because I am a journalist, and journalists know what to do with evidence. I did not confront Camille that night. She came home at 8:22 p.m. She said the live hit had run long. I said that was fine. I made her a plate of the pasta I'd made earlier and set it on the counter and told her I had an early start. She thanked me. We didn't eat together. I lay in bed that night and I did not sleep, and I thought about every conversation we'd had in the last 3 years. Every time she asked how work was going. Every time she sympathized with my frustration about a killed pitch. Every time she told me Blake was probably just going through editorial changes and I should be patient. She knew. She had known the whole time. Don't fall apart right now, Mike. You're going to fall apart later. First, you're going to work. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. The next morning, I called in to my editorial check-in. Blake's voice over the phone, same as always, professional, measured, and I was so calm that it scared me a little. I asked about the quarterly editorial direction. He gave me the standard answer. I took notes. I said thank you. I hung up. Then I called a woman named Sheila Stone. Sheila Stone is 51 years old and runs the Texas Bureau of the American Sports Review, the most widely read sports journalism platform in the country, digital and print combined. I had met Sheila at the Associated Press Sports Editors Conference in Houston back in 2019. We had kept in loose touch since then. She was sharp, she was fair, and most importantly, she published the kind of work that mattered. Sheila, I said, when she picked up, I've got a story for you, but I need to meet in person. A pause. What kind of story? The kind that's going to make some noise. Another pause. Longer this time? I'm in Austin through Wednesday. You want to come down? I was in my car within an hour. Austin in March is one of the great American places to be if you have something difficult to think through. The city hums with a specific energy, tech money and live music, and the oldest university in the state all layered on top of each other, along the Colorado River. And it is just far enough from Fort Worth, 3 hours, I-35 south, to feel like a different world without actually being one. I drove down on a Tuesday morning in March 2024. The sky was clear in that sharp-edged Texas way that happens after cold fronts move through. I took 35 south, and I did not listen to music, and I did not call anyone. I rehearsed what I was going to say to Sheila Stone, but mostly I was just thinking. About Camille. About Blake. About the word manageable. About 17 years of marriage that I was beginning to understand I had been navigating with half the information. I'd like to tell you I handled that drive with grace and dignity. The truth is I pulled off at a rest stop near Hillsboro, sat at a concrete picnic table in the wind, and called my younger brother Danny in San Antonio. Danny Baker is 44, works in commercial real estate, and is the kind of man who listens before he speaks. When I told him what I'd heard in the backyard, the recording, the parking stub, all of it, he was quiet for a long moment. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I will be. That's not what I asked." "I know," I said. "I will be anyway." He told me to be careful, not careful with the revenge. He didn't put it that way, he'd never put it that way. But careful with myself. He said the thing people don't tell you about being betrayed is that the anger is the easy part. It's the grief underneath the anger that gets you when you're not paying attention. He was right. He's been right about most things. I got back in the car. I drove the rest of the way to Austin. Sheila Stone met me at the bar at Hotel Van Zant on Lavaca Street in the Rainy Street District, a place she'd suggested, which was either her idea of neutral territory or she just liked the cocktail program. And I wasn't about to ask which. She was already there when I arrived. Small woman, sharp eyes behind wire-frame glasses, the kind of stillness that comes from decades of interviewing people who are trying not to be interviewed. She had a sparkling water in front of her and a legal pad that she turned face down when she saw me, which is a journalist's habit I both recognized and respected. "Mike Baker," she said, in the way people say names when they're simultaneously greeting you and sizing you up. "Sheila." I sat down, ordered a club soda. "Thanks for making time. You said it was going to make noise." She folded her hands on the table. "I'm here." So I told her. Everything. The white piece, the 11 parallel pitches, the parking stub, the backyard, the recording. I showed her the voice memos file on my phone, let her listen to the first 3 minutes through her earbuds. I watched her face. Sheila Stone had a face that was trained not to react, and it still reacted, just barely. When she pulled the earbuds out, she set them on the table very carefully. This is your editor. Yes. And the woman is your wife. Yes. And he explicitly says he's redirecting your pitches to other writers. He says the Dallas piece, which won a Texas Press Association award under Devin White's byline, came directly from my March 2022 submission. She looked at me for a long moment. How many of your pitches do you think were shared? I've documented 11 confirmed parallels over 3 years. There may be more I haven't found. She picked up her sparkling water and held it without drinking it. A thinking gesture. You know this is more than a personal story, she said. This is editorial misconduct. If one editor at a mid-sized regional outlet did this, the question is whether it's a broader practice. I know. I said, and I think it might be. I told her about the other 2 writers. And this is the part of the story where it gets bigger than just me. In the weeks between the backyard and the Austin meeting, I had made 2 phone calls. The first was to a woman named Priya Nair, 36, formerly a staff writer at Lone Star Sports Weekly from 2019 to 2000. She had left the magazine abruptly. Blake had put it about that she'd taken a better opportunity in Houston, which was technically true but incomplete in the way that true but incomplete things usually are. Priya was now freelancing out of Houston. Good work, respected, but she'd never quite regained the platform she'd had before she left. I had always liked Priya. We'd covered some of the same beats. When I called her, there was a pause when I said who it was, and then she said, "How did you know to call?" That sentence told me everything I needed to know. The second call was to a man named Gary Hewitt, 42, a former senior editor at Lone Star Sports Weekly, who had been quietly pushed out in 2021. Restructuring, Blake had called it. Gary was now working in sports PR in Dallas. He picked up on the first ring, and when I said I wanted to talk about his time at the magazine, he said, "I've been waiting for someone to call about this for 2 years. 3 writers, 3 careers that had been slowed, diverted, or ended. 1 editor." When I walked Sheila through the full picture, the parallel pitches across all 3 of us, the documented pattern, the recording, she set down her sparkling water and said, "I'm going to need your lawyer's contact information." The drive back to Fort Worth that evening, I felt different. Not good. Not yet. But different in the way you feel when you've converted something that was crushing you into something that has weight and direction and momentum. I had walked into that meeting with a parking stub and a recording. And a theory. I was driving home with a story. 3 weeks. That's what Sheila said she needed. 3 weeks to bring in the publication's legal team, to independently verify the pattern of pitch redirection across all 3 writers, and to confirm the recording was usable in the context of the piece. Texas is a one-party consent state for recordings. That means a recording made by one participant to a conversation is legal even without the other party's knowledge. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. What I recorded in my backyard was legal. I had confirmed this with a Texas media attorney, a man named Carson Campbell. No relation to the other Campbell, who found that coincidence as funny as I didn't. Before I drove to Austin. 3 weeks. I could do 3 weeks. Here is something nobody tells you about the performance of an undamaged marriage while quietly dismantling the people who destroyed it. It is exhausting. Not emotionally. That part I had compartmentalized with the specific ruthlessness of someone who grew up in a house where you learned to keep your feelings where they wouldn't get stepped on. Physically exhausting. Because the act of being normal, of maintaining eye contact and asking about someone's day and passing the salt at dinner, requires a constant low-level effort that compounds across days and weeks until it feels like carrying something heavy across a long, flat distance. Camille talked about a segment she was working on, a feature on the University of North Texas women's basketball program. She was excited about it. She had good energy those weeks, which I recognized with a clarity I had not had before, as the energy of someone whose life outside the house was going well. I listened. I asked questions. I did not throw anything. I went into the office. I sat in pitch meetings with Blake Campbell and I looked at him across the conference table, and I said things like, I'm thinking the angle could go deeper on the salary cap implications. And he said things like, let me think on that, Mike. And I nodded and wrote something in my notebook and thought about Sheila Stone's legal team in Austin doing their work. Once, in the elevator going back up to the 14th floor after lunch, Blake said, "You seem like you're in a good headspace lately." "Things are clear," I said. He smiled. "Good. Clear is good." You have no idea, I thought. Clear is going to be the last thing you ever call me. Devin White called me on a Thursday morning in late March. I should say, Sheila's team had reached out to Devin to verify the sourcing of his Dallas Cowboys piece. They had not, at her instruction and my agreement, revealed where the original pitch had come from. They simply asked Devin how the assignment had come to him. When Devin called me, he sounded shaken. "Mike, did you pitch a piece on Cowboys' ownership structure in March of 2022? I did. A silence. Blake gave me that story in October 2022. He said it was a magazine concept that had been floating around the editorial room. He said it was, and I remember this exactly, ripe for a young voice. Devin. He told me the previous writer who'd looked at it had dropped the thread. The younger man's voice had changed. "Was that you? Were you the writer?" "Yeah," I said. "I was the writer." Another silence. Longer. "I won a Texas Press Association award for that piece." "I know." "Mike, I don't even know what to say." "You didn't know," I told him. "That is the complete truth, and I need you to hear it. You didn't know. The only question now is whether you want to help make it right." He said yes before I'd finished the sentence. 4 writers now. The story had grown again, and then Gary Hewitt sent me an email. Just a link, and 3 words. "Look at this." The link was to a LinkedIn announcement posted that morning. Blake Campbell had been named one of the finalists for the Texas Sportswriter of the Year editorial award, presented annually by the Texas Sports Writers Association, for excellence in editorial leadership and development of talent. I read that sentence 3 times. Excellence in editorial leadership and development of talent. I sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then I opened my laptop and wrote an email to Sheila Stone with the subject line, "We have a deadline." The Texas Sports Writers Association annual awards dinner was scheduled for a Friday evening in April 2024 at the Omni Fort Worth Hotel, the big one on Commerce Street downtown. 15 stories of Texas hospitality right in the heart of the city. It was one of the most attended nights in the Texas sports media calendar. Editors, writers, broadcast journalists, publicists, franchise representatives, university athletic directors. If you worked in Texas sports media, you were there. Sheila Stone and her team had exactly 3 weeks and 2 days to be ready. "Can you make it?" I asked her. "We were already ahead of schedule," she said. "Your timeline just gave us a reason to finish." The piece would run on the morning of the awards dinner. Digital first, at 7 a.m. Print would follow the next week. 4 writers' accounts, documented pitch parallels, the relevant excerpts from the recording, reviewed and approved by legal, and Blake Campbell's career in editorial leadership laid open on the table for anyone who wanted to read it. "Are you ready for what comes after this?" Sheila asked me. It was a real question. "I've been ready," I said, since I was standing in my backyard in February. I did not tell Camille, not a word, not a hint. She continued to make plans for that Friday. She mentioned she might attend the awards dinner with some KTVT colleagues. She covered sports-adjacent content and had acquaintances in the room. I told her that sounded nice. I told her I was planning to attend as well. She seemed pleased by this. She said it would be good for us to be seen out together. That word again. Be seen. I had spent 17 years building something real and being seen while someone else made it smaller. I had spent 3 months staying quiet while my wife and my editor moved through my house and my career with the comfortable ease of people who believed I was, fundamentally, manageable. I was done being managed. The American Sports Review piece dropped at 7:03 a.m. on Friday, April 12, 2024. I know the exact time because I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when my phone buzzed with Sheila Stone's text. "It's live." The title of the piece was "The Editor's Cut: How One Texas Publication's Top Editor Redirected Writer's Original Work for Years, and Why 3 Journalists Are Finally Speaking Out." 4 bylines: Priya Nair, Gary Hewitt, Devin White, and mine, Mike Baker, listed first because I was the one who made the call to Sheila, which she insisted meant something. I read it through one more time, start to finish, even though I'd read every draft and revision for the past 3 weeks. It was clean. It was precise. It was fair in the way that the best journalism is fair, which does not mean soft, it means accurate. Then I set my phone face down on the table, finished my coffee, showered, and put on the gray suit I'd had dry cleaned the week before. Camille was still upstairs getting ready. She had no idea. That's fine. She was going to find out soon enough. The Omni Fort Worth is a beautiful hotel. If you've never been to Fort Worth, the Omni is the kind of building that tells you the city has a sense of itself. Warm stone exterior, the lobby filled with the kind of quiet Texas grandeur that isn't trying to impress you so much as simply showing you what it is. The ballroom where the Texas Sports Writers Association held its annual dinner was on the 3rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out at the Fort Worth skyline, round tables with white linen, the kind of event where the breadbasket arrives before the program booklet. I arrived at 6:45 p.m. The dinner started at 7. Cocktail hour would have already been running for 45 minutes. I want to be honest about what I was feeling walking into that room. Not triumphant, not electric. What I felt was more like the feeling you get at the end of a very long project, a specific tiredness that has satisfaction underneath it. The kind that says, it's done and it was worth it. I had my phone in my jacket pocket. Sheila Stone's piece had, as of 4 p.m., been shared 8,000 times and was trending in Texas media circles. I had not checked it since then. I didn't need to. I saw Blake Campbell at the bar before he saw me. He was holding a glass of white wine, talking to 2 men I recognized from the Dallas Morning News sports desk, laughing at something. He was wearing a dark navy blazer and his hair was freshly cut. He looked, in that moment, like exactly what he was supposed to look like, a respected editor at the peak of an estimable career, about to accept an award. He hadn't checked his phone in the last 5 minutes. I could tell because when people start getting tagged and mentioned in something that is moving fast on the internet, there's a specific thing that happens. A slight pull of distraction. A pocket-reaching reflex. He didn't have it yet. He was still in the room he thought he was in. I got a drink. Ginger ale. I wanted to be sharp. I circulated. I spoke to people I knew. I made small talk about the NBA playoffs and the Spurs rebuilding season and the ongoing question of whether the Texas Rangers could repeat their 2023 World Series performance. Normal conversation. Good conversation. The kind I've had at events like this for 20 years. Camille was across the room with her KTVT colleagues. We made eye contact once. She smiled. I smiled back. She hadn't checked her phone either. Dinner was served at 7:30. I was seated at a table near the middle of the room. Not a bad seat. Not a great seat. The kind of placement that a writer who has been slowly moved down the masthead over 3 years ends up with. Fine. I had no complaints about the view. The program moved through the usual structure. Welcome remarks from the TXSA president, a video tribute to a retired sports writer from the San Antonio Express-News, a series of category awards. I ate the salmon and drank my ginger ale and waited. The Editor of the Year category, the one Blake Campbell was nominated for, was scheduled 3rd from last. At 9:15, my phone began to vibrate in my jacket pocket. Not once. Continuously. I did not take it out. I already knew what it was. Sheila had sent me a message at 9:08. It's accelerating. Local news has picked it up. Sports Illustrated Online posted a summary. I'm on the phone with AP. At 9:22, I saw Blake Campbell finally reach into his pocket. I watched his face. Journalists learn faces. It's one of the foundational skills of the work, the ability to read the micro-expressions that people don't know they're producing, the instant of reality before the performance kicks in. I had interviewed athletes, coaches, franchise owners, politicians. I had watched people's faces absorb information they weren't prepared for. What happened on Blake Campbell's face at 9:22 p.m. in the ballroom of the Omni Fort Worth, as he read whatever he was reading on his phone, was the most complete collapse I have ever seen happen that quietly. It wasn't dramatic. His face didn't crumple. He didn't gasp or stand up or make a scene. He just went flat. The animation left him as smoothly as air leaving a room when a window seal fails. One moment he was a person performing confidence. The next he was just a man sitting at a table, holding a phone running out of road. He looked up once, scanning the room. Our eyes met. I held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then I looked away. The TXSA president returned to the podium at 9:38 to announce the Editor of the Year nominees. He said 4 names. Blake Campbell's was one of them. Then he paused. He leaned slightly toward the microphone, the way people do when they are delivering information that was not part of the original program, and said, "Before we announce this year's honoree, I want to acknowledge that the TXSA board is aware of a significant piece of investigative journalism published this morning that speaks directly to the work of one of our nominees. Out of respect for the integrity of this award and the journalism community it represents, the board has agreed that this category will be deferred pending a review." The room went very quiet. That is the kind of quiet that a ballroom full of journalists produces when they process something simultaneously. Not a shocked quiet, a professional one, the silence of people who understand exactly what has just happened and are already writing the story of it in their heads. I picked up my glass of ginger ale. I raised it, slightly, in the direction of the podium. Nobody at my table saw it. I didn't need them to. Blake Campbell left the dinner at 9:44 p.m. I watched him go. He didn't look at me again on his way out. Camille left at 9:51. I don't know if she spoke to him. I don't know what happened between them in the weeks and months that followed, because by the time those weeks arrived, I was no longer a part of her daily life. I stayed until the end of the program. Here is what happened afterward. I'm going to tell it plainly, because it deserves plainness. Blake Campbell was placed on administrative leave by Lone Star Sports Weekly's parent publishing company, Ridgecrest Media Group, on the Monday following the dinner. He resigned 14 days later. A statement from Ridgecrest acknowledged editorial practices inconsistent with the publication's standards and announced a review of its submissions and intellectual property policies. Devin White publicly attributed his Dallas Cowboys piece to my original pitch. He wrote a statement on his Substack that got 15,000 reads in the first 24 hours. He also returned the prize money from the Texas Press Association Award and petitioned the association to review the attribution. The TPA is currently reviewing it. Devin and I have had coffee twice since then. He is a good writer and a good man, and none of what happened was his fault. Priya Nair is back in Fort Worth. She's freelancing for the American Sports Review now. Last week she had a front-of-book piece. I texted her when I saw it. She texted back, "Took long enough." Gary Hewitt is still in PR. He says he's content. I believe him. Sheila Stone's piece was named one of the 10 best works of sports journalism in the country by the Associated Press Sports Editors for 2024. My name is on it. I'm not going to pretend that doesn't matter, because it does. Camille and I separated in May of 2024. The divorce was filed in August. I won't detail the proceedings because they are personal and ongoing, and also because this story is not about the divorce. The divorce is just the part that wraps up a marriage that was already over, that had probably been over for longer than I'd let myself know. What I will say is this: I did not yell. I did not cry in front of her. I did not make dramatic speeches or throw things. I hired a good attorney, a woman named Sandra Reyes out of Fort Worth, and I conducted myself with the dignity of a man who knows exactly what he did and did not do wrong. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. I was offered Blake Campbell's position. The interim editorial director of Ridgecrest Media Group called me on a Tuesday morning in June. He was smooth and apologetic and very good at the kind of conversation that tries to turn a corporation's culpability into an opportunity for the person who was harmed. He offered me the editor-in-chief role, more money than I'd made in any previous year. Corner office on the 14th floor of Burnett Plaza. I thought about it for almost 24 hours, not because I was tempted by the corner office. I was not, and never have been, a corner office person. I thought about it because I wanted to be sure I was saying no for the right reasons, and not just the satisfying ones. I called him back the next morning. "I appreciate the offer," I said, genuinely. "But I'm a writer. That's what I do. I'm going to keep doing it." He said he understood. He said he hoped I'd consider continuing to contribute to the magazine. "Send me a pitch," I told him. "I'll think about it." 6 months after the awards dinner, I was sitting in my new apartment on West 7th Street in Fort Worth, a clean one-bedroom with good light and a writing desk that faces the window. When my phone rang, it was a number I didn't recognize. A young woman, a journalism student at TCU. She said she'd read the American Sports Review piece and she was writing a paper on editorial ethics, and she wanted to know if I'd be willing to talk about how I'd gathered the information and what had driven me to pursue the story. When I could have walked away, I said yes. We talked for an hour. At the end, she said, "Were you scared? When you were standing in the backyard listening?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said. "I was scared before, when I thought the career was dying and I didn't know why. When I was blaming myself for something that wasn't my fault. That was the scary part. Not knowing. What changed?" "The not knowing ended," I said. "Once you know, you're just a journalist with a story. And that's not scary. That's home. My byline is still in print, every week. On stories that matter. The kind that make people call me. The kind where the name Mike Baker at the top of a piece tells the reader exactly what they're about to get. Something true, something earned, and something that nobody tried to manage. That's all I ever wanted. That's all I ever was. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely.